Hey there, and welcome back to 31 Days of Halloween, and today we are on day 28, which it's hard to believe we're almost at the end. And today I checked out 2024's Trap. I've seen a lot of advertisement about this. I've seen advertisements on my smart TV's home screen. I've seen Instagram ads. I've seen YouTube ads. This was a very well promoted film. I was eager to see it. I think I mentioned it in a previous video because this is also an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like previous day, Knock at the Cabin was also an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I had been interested in it, but at the time when I filmed that one, you still needed to pay to stream this. However, I checked today, and luck would have it that it had premiered on HBO's streaming app Max, and so I was able to watch it today. It stars Josh Hartnett, and it's suspenseful, it's a thriller. The straight up horror aspects of the film are sort of almost a second thought to the main plot of the film. And this is a really interesting angle to kind of approach the film. I will just give you a quick synopsis. The movie starts with there is a rather doting father played by Josh Hartnett who is bringing his, teenage daughter to a major concert for a pop star. And it starts off just kind of building on them. They're getting to the concert. They do kind of goofy things. He's a typical silly dad. And, they're at the arena. Things are kind of just unfolding naturally for a concert going experience, and kind of getting the lay of things, finding their seats, getting something to eat and a drink, dealing with crowds, going through security, stuff like that. And as the story is kind of unfolding, we're experiencing a larger than normal police presence at this show. And if any of you have been to concerts, there's security, but there's not necessarily a police presence, usually, unless there was some sort of threat. The movie is supposed to take place in Philadelphia. However, the film itself, the exterior shots of the arena were filmed in Toronto at the Rogers Centre, which I have actually attended concerts there myself. Interestingly enough, the interior shots were done at a different arena in Hamilton, Ontario. So the interior wasn't familiar to me. I have not actually been to the arena in Hamilton. However, I was very familiar with the area of Toronto where they filmed this, as I have been to concerts in Toronto quite frequently. So it was kind of cool to be like, oh wait, I know exactly where they are. I know what sidewalk they're on. I've walked there. Oh yeah, that's that overpass. You got to be careful making a turn there. Things like that are always a little fascinating to me when you can kind of recognize a landmark for something like this. And I mentioned a little bit in the review I did of the movie with the friends who were supposed to go to the music festival, that concerts are a very difficult thing to shoot sometimes. That was hashtag AMFAD, the All My Friends Are Dead. Yeah, they were supposed to go to a music festival, which I would imagine would be very difficult, especially for a lower budget shoot. However, when you relegate things to an arena setting, it's a lot smaller, and it's relatively easy to get cool crowd shots because arenas are busy. They always have things going on. You could even get arena shots at a hockey game. Once the lights are out, you really only have, people's cell phone lights or, concert lights or things like that. So it'd be relatively easy to use an arena setting for a film. and make it believable. I think a lot more so than a music festival. So I think if you're a filmmaker, and you kind of want to introduce certain elements or certain aspects to your film and be able to shoot them in a believable way, uh, shrinking your purview of maybe from music festival to regular concert is a lot easier, I think, to satisfy. And so I believe I had mentioned this movie when I was talking about All My Friends Are Dead, because I knew that a lot of it took place at a concert. And I was interested in seeing how that was done. And the reason that I mentioned, the interiors of the arena and things like that is because a big chunk of the film has to do with how an arena normally functions or works and how events are normally planned out, because it turns out that the police presence at this arena is they're looking for a serial killer who they got a tip that the serial killer had purchased tickets to this concert. So they had it on good authority that this killer was at the concert. And normally at this point in films, it would turn into, some sort of, oh, they're looking for the killer, is he gonna, target Josh Hartnett's kid, is there going to be some sort of, it's called Trap. So you're also sort of wondering, like, is this whole concert like a trap for the concert goers? Is this supposed to be some sort of, giant jigsaw type trap? And I think the neat thing about this movie, and this will be I apologize, mild spoiler alert. If you'd like to turn this video off now and watch the movie first, I totally understand, but I want to let you know that there is a mild spoiler coming up, because I really can't discuss the movie without discussing this point, and I'm also not entirely sure. I think once the movie has been out on streaming for a little bit, I do think that this spoiler is going to end up in the description of the movie anyway. But I wanted full disclosure, spoiler alert. It turns out that Josh Hartnett is actually the serial killer they're looking for. And the majority of the movie is us following his perspective of him taking his daughter to a concert, having an active victim waiting for him, and trying to elude the police presence or the FBI presence in this arena while he's taking his daughter to a concert. And the reason I said I think it was very important I had to kind of spoil that in order to discuss the rest of the movie is because this is a little bit different. We have watched movies from the killer's perspective. We have watched movies that have made the audience kind of directly interact with those things. I mean, we have movies like Funny Games. We have Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. We have totally blanking on the name of it, but there's the original slasher movie where the killer was using a camera and killing people with his tripod. We have seen movies from the killer's perspective. And actually, day 2 of 31 Days of Horror was In a Violent Nature, and the whole movie was told from the killer's perspective. And I think this was really fascinating concept for a movie, because Josh Hartnett is a wonderful actor, and it's really good to see him back on screen a little bit more regularly. I know that, the trajectory of his career changed slightly, over time, and we saw him doing less projects. I'm really glad to see him back. I think it's also good that he was kind of able to circumvent the being a super teen heartthrob and then burning out, and not continuing, an acting career into his kind of golden years, because I feel like a lot of actors just get better with age. And I think he's definitely one of them. I mean, I was a fan of his back, when he was doing early horror, like The Faculty in the early part of his career. He also did a movie that I adore that I feel like nobody has ever seen, called Lucky Number 11, that he was in actually with Morgan Freeman and Ben Kingsley. I believe it was Ben Kingsley, if I'm remembering correctly. And Bruce Willis. And it was a brilliant movie. And I felt like he had a really promising kind of career coming out of all of those things. And like I said, it stalled a little bit. But now I've seen him, he also did movies like Sin City, which are a little bit more niche. And he played a convincing kind of sympathetic assassin in that movie. So I think that kind of at least lends to the fact that I had kind of heard a spoiler about the movie that, like, oh, Josh Hartnett's the bad guy kind of thing. And I was like, okay, yeah, I could see that. But watching the film itself, there is a lot of stress and anxiety, and the horror of it kind of comes from your realization of when you're watching it that you're kind of rooting for him. But at the same time, you're not. It's more, he's the character you're following, and you don't really want his story to end. And you know that if he's apprehended, at some point earlier in the movie, that his story might end. And I think that's a clever thing to do. So you kind of get the M. Night Shyamalan twist a little bit, but the twist is more in the entire picture of what we're watching, not in a mega twist at the end. And of course, there's good storytelling. The crimes themselves are kept vague. There's no blood in the movie. There's a lot of moments where you have sort of expectations of like, oh, he's going to kill that guy. He's going to kill this guy's going to get it. And it does subvert a lot of that. And a lot of that is down to, once again, we're watching another PG-13 horror movie. But I'm really thrilled because I'm seeing this year that people are actually doing legitimate good horror and thriller and suspense stories. And they're doing it in a PG-13 setting, but they're doing it appropriately. They're not trying to adapt more mature stories and then jam it into a PG-13 rating by like trimming off kind of necessary, plot or film elements. They're presenting a story that does not need to have R-rated elements. Yes, the main character is a serial killer, but the words serial killer are not R-rated. It's seeing the results of what the serial killer has done. That is what's R-rated. The fact that serial killers do kill people, not R-rated. But hearing details of their crimes is R-rated. And with the exception of hearing that the killer's called the Butcher, very vague, that's pretty much the only real indication we get of anything that happens to any of his victims. We just know he's a serial killer. He's called the Butcher. He does terrible things to people. He currently has a victim like on hand, and the authorities are about to seemingly the authorities are about to apprehend him. And it's interesting to see him as a genuine person struggling with his own, kind of mental things. I will criticize the film a lot for using a sort of almost like a mental illness type diagnosis, or a sort of hearing voices, hallucinating, those sorts of things. I will criticize the movie for using that trope again for motive. We have seen so many films. There are so many motives. We have seen horror, mystery, thriller, crime drama, court shows. There are so many motives out there, and I'm really sick and tired of the motive being mental illness, because that's something that's very close to my heart. I myself, mentally ill. A lot of people that I really care about, also mentally ill. Does that necessarily mean that we're all walking around schizophrenic and that we need to be, heavily medicated in order to function and not kill people? Absolutely not. Basically, it means that I can, paint a masterpiece, but I can't fold my laundry. And I struggle with movies that I feel use mental illness as sort of the magic answer. It's the same when you're watching anything that really should have like a scientific answer to it or a scientific explanation, and they're like, magic did it. It's magic. It's the same thing for me. It's like, okay, well, what's the motive? Why does this guy kill people? Mental illness. Runs in the family. Okay, well that encompasses an awful lot of things. He could be autistic, he could have ADHD, he could be schizophrenic, he could be bipolar, he could have anorexia. All of those things are designated as mental illness, and I don't like the vague, let's just throw that out there. Well, he hallucinates and he sees, images, and they tell him to kill people. That's his urge. That's a movie trope. There are plenty of people who have hallucinations and they do very scary things when that's happening. But those same people are not cold, calculated, methodical serial killers. And we see that all too often in movies, and it's a cop-out at this point. Most of the time, when they have apprehended serial killers, they usually pass mental health evaluations with flying colors. They're not mentally ill the majority of the time. And also, a lot of them are very good at knowing how to answer the questions so that they get the results that they want. So those things can even be manipulated. And when we actually look at true crime statistics and we look at real serial killers, there's not that many. When you look at the vast majority of people, if you think about the fact that there's 8 billion people on the planet and the FBI estimates that there's about 50 active serial killers in the United States at any given time, 50 people in the United States out of probably 1 billion people in the country is absolutely nothing. That's not even, it's not even a rating percentage. And so the fact that you have this limited number of people and you kind of want to slap the same motive on all of them, like, they're sick in the head. Okay, well, what does that mean? That's my biggest criticism. So there are, he's kind of seeing visions of a person. I hate when movies do that. You lost me, because then, we're sitting here going like, oh, is this in his head? Is this real? Don't make me question that. Tell me the story. Tell me the story as we're going to experience it. And don't use cop-out answers like other films do. There's kind of the Scream conversation in the movie between Billy and Randy and Stu, where they're in a video store and they're talking about who possibly would have motive to kill Casey and Steve at the beginning of the movie. And they're kind of all accusing each other in ways, shape, or forms. Like, didn't you want to date her? Didn't she turn you down for this? Weren't you the one out here doing this? And at one point, so, well, what would my motive be? If I were to do this, I don't have a motive for that. And the answer was, it's the millennium. Motives are incidental. And for a while, that could kind of work. That's kind of it's kind of a okay cop out, but we're not there anymore. This is 2024. We know so much more about how the human mind works. We are so much more in tune with different neurodivergencies and the fact that this afflicts a lot of people. And especially since 2020, there has been such eye-opening things coming forward about things that people are experiencing day to day. So the reason that I'm criticizing this is because now it's 2024. We've had plenty of time to get our motives straight where it doesn't have to be mental illness. Like I said, not necessarily a spoiler. It's something that you'll just see kind of unfolding throughout the movie, but it's something that I take issue with. That being said, the movie itself, enjoyable. When you kind of get to the end of the movie, you're not really sure where it's going. The final scene, not that there is a credit scene that is definitely a must watch. But the final scene of the actual movie, I think, is superfluous. It's dumb. It did not need to be included. They could have cut well before that. I also don't like endings where they're kind of like, could there be a sequel? I don't know. I don't like any of that. Give me finality at the end of a movie. If you would like to make a sequel from it, you can take those final moments and do whatever the hell you want with them in the next movie. But when I'm done watching this movie's over. And I'm not interested in you setting up a sequel, because if you wrote a good enough story, if you wrote a good enough piece of literature or writing, like of film writing, screenwriting, if you've written a good video game, if you have a good story, you don't have to set up a sequel for there to be another story told. All you have to do is write a story that has elements to it that can be expanded on. And if you want the end of your story to be somebody's not really dead or somebody escaped, or if you want any of that to go on, there are plenty of horror movies that have figured out how to force sequels out of the most bizarre endings of previous films. I mean, we have come up with there literally was at one point Jason Voorhees was like apprehended by the FBI and was like cryogenically frozen and stabbed, and he was finally resurrected in space. Horror is the genre where you can do anything with anything, because part of horror is the supernatural, is the unknown of the things that are possible. So you don't need to leave an open ending in a horror film. That's not the scary part. The scary part is when they come back. The scary part isn't a jump scare at the end. If you truly want to scare an audience with a maybe the killer is still out there, maybe the killer's not dead type ending, then you need to make their ending ambiguous. You can't decide to make their ending final and then a few minutes later in the movie then tease, but maybe not, and then end the film. Because all that does is make it abundantly clear that your film or your script or your book or whatever that you put forth in the first place, the first one that was published, was not good enough when it was first created to garner more content. That whoever is responsible for putting this out, the publishing company, the game publisher, the movie studio, were not confident in this film or this form of entertainment. So when it was released, they're now waiting for the totals to come in. They're waiting to see if this was profitable, if people like this, if it was good enough. And if, then they'll greenlight a sequel. And you can always tell these movies by the fact that they are the ones that have to have the final scare. They are the ones that have to have that little maybe at the end. And unfortunately, more often than not, it stays a maybe, because people don't want sequels to those things. And those are the moments where you lose them. But if you want to scare somebody, if you really want them to believe, like, oh crap, like this could continue, this could be real, this is scary, I'm going to have nightmares tonight, then you don't give your bad guy an ending. You leave it open. You leave it ambiguous. You leave your characters scared, because if you leave your characters scared, you will leave your audience scared. And this movie suffered from that a little bit. But I do have to say, I don't really know what the movie itself was going for. M. Night Shyamalan's movies are a little bit ambiguous when it comes to what genre they actually want to fit in, because he uses a lot of horror elements, but he tends to dial them back enough that they do fit into the nice little PG-13 rating, but then it makes them difficult to categorize. The Sixth Sense can be pretty clearly a horror film. It involves ghosts. There are jump scares. That can be a very scary movie. Now, The Happening would be considered horror because it's plants making people kill themselves. But the way that the movie is portrayed, there are not a lot of horror elements other than the scenes of people kind of offing themselves. But the concept in itself and the way that it's portrayed, and Mark Wahlberg pretending to be a science teacher, all of those things make it very hard to categorize it. Maybe it's more of like a drama, thriller, suspense kind of thing. And it's the same with The Village. You have the monsters, that's your horror element, but everything else in the movie really lends itself to drama or thriller, suspense, those kinds of things. And those are things that we've come to understand about M. Night Shyamalan's filmmaking. And I kind of think if he decided that he was going to direct full-on horror or full-on drama, I almost think that the twists would be even more impressive, or the twists would be even more surprising, conclusive. I think some of his films, and this one included, suffers from trying to be a little bit too broad and inclusive for audiences. and it sort of loses its luster a little bit. Now, that being said, this was also really cool because the head of the FBI in this film was played by somebody that I don't know if everybody would recognize, but her name is Hayley Mills. She was a child actress who was in the original Parent Trap. Not the Lindsay Lohan one, the one before that, before Lindsay Lohan was even born. And then, she grew up, she was in the film business. She was in That Darn Cat. She was, known for that. And then she actually played Miss Bliss on Good Morning Miss Bliss, which was a like sitcom style show starring like teenagers. That is what became Saved by the Bell. And she was originally Zach and company's teacher at Bayside High. And that developed into that. So that's where you might recognize the head of the FBI from. And then there is a pop star in the movie that's whose concert they are attending. She's called the Raven Queen, and the actress who plays the Raven Queen is actually M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, and she is a singer. And so the vocals for her songs and some of the soundtrack were actually recorded by her, and I think that's a little neat connection there. I think this is an enjoyable watch. I think had I paid to see this at the movies, or had I paid to stream it, like if I rented it or purchased it to stream it, I think I would find myself a lot more disappointed. But I think that now that it's available on Max for streaming, I think it's a good afternoon watch. I've talked a little bit about if you have those younger teens that are just kind of getting into horror, they're asking about different movies they can watch. I think this would be totally appropriate for that demographic. There is not, there's no sex, there's no drugs, there's minimal swearing, if any. There is no real violence. It's all in kind of just what's discussed or what's inferred. But it overall is a good movie. It's well acted. It's enjoyable. Do I recommend it? Yeah, sure. It's a 3 on my scale. I'm not disappointed that I watched it. Like I said, I probably would have been disappointed if I paid extra money beyond my subscription to Max to watch it, but it was a decent way to spend my morning. And I'm really glad that I got a chance to watch this movie because, like I said, it's been on my list. I have seen it advertised, everywhere. I have a few more movies like that I'm kind of hoping, hit the streaming soon. But now this was day 28, and we're closely approaching the big day. And I don't really know what we're going to do after that, but we have a few more days of reviews to get up. And I hope you're enjoying this. And leave a like or a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know what you think. And otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day.